So what we'll now graph is r equals 2 cosine 3 theta. And so I got asked by one of my favorite cats, they said, Miss Savoya, can you please show how to sketch a rose quickly? I guess Rachel wasn't a big fan. This is my cat friend Rachel. She wasn't a big fan of all of this work that we had to do for the last one. So sure, I'll show you the quick way to graph this rose. So first, you have to realize that this is a rose. So we know it is because it's of the form a cosine n theta. So let's figure out what n is. N is 3. So what this means is n is an odd number. This is only going to have 3 petals. Now, let's think about what the maximum length of the petal is going to be. Well, what is the maximum that this can output? What is the maximum that 2 cosine 3 theta can output? That's going to be A. So the absolute value of A, I should say. So we know the max petal length is 2. So now what we're concerned with is when is this going to give us 2? And now not just 2, remember, -2 as well. So we have to solve these two equations. -2 because when r is -2, you can technically write it as r is 2 as long as you add 180. So you have to get both of these. So if we divide by 2, we get 1 equals cosine of 3 theta, and we get -1 equals cosine of 3 theta. So we're going to go through and we're going to solve these. So inverse cosine of 1 equals 3 theta. So when does cosine equal 1? Equals 1 at 0 degrees. 0 degrees plus 360 degrees n equals 3 theta. Divide by 3 and you get 0 degrees plus 120 degrees n equals theta. Inverse cosine of -1 equals 3 theta. When does cosine equal -1? 180 degrees plus 360 degrees n equals 3 theta. Divide everything by 3, and we get 60 degrees plus 120 n equals theta. So now we've got these 3 values here and these 3 values here. Except you might be saying to yourself, wait a second, n was 3. Why in the world did I just get 6 measures? I shouldn't. Remember, write what you got down. This is when r is 2. This is when r is 2. This is when r is 2. This is when r is -2. This is when r is -2. This is when r is -2. So here's our list of our 6 answers we got right now. But remember, we're going to rewrite this for when r is 2. So this point, I'll use a different color right now. I'll do red. If I take this one, okay, and I rewrite it so that r is 2, I have to add 180 degrees to 60. And 180 plus 60 is 240 degrees. Look, this point and this point is the same. So there's no point in having this. It's coterminal with that point. -2 with a theta of 180. Well, to make that +2, I have to add 180 to 180. That puts us at 360. 360 is coterminal with this r2 0 degrees. This point is coterminal with this point. Next one, this is 2. This is going to be 480 degrees. 480 degrees is coterminal with 120. This is coterminal with this point. These are not unique points. These are actually coterminal with these 3 points here. So how many points do you have that reach the r equals 2? You have 3 points. So what we would do is graph those 3 points and then make our rows. Okay, so let's get r equals 2 cosine 3 theta sketched. So we know it's going to be 2 at 0 degrees. Okay, r is 2. We know it's going to be 2 at 120 degrees. Very good. And at 240 degrees. And so now, just make your rows. There it is. So, I'm going to write something down. Why don't you write this down as well? Why don't you write down r equals 4 sine of 6 theta. And what I want you to tell me is, what is the length of petal from the center to the tip of the petal? And why don't you tell me the number of petals you will have? Figure that out. So the length of the petal is 4, and the number of petals is 12 because n is 6. 6 is even, so 2 times 6, 12. So why don't we do one practice? You can graph it on your own, and then you can check your answer. So why don't we graph, let's see, why don't you graph r equals 4 sine of 4 theta? So, since n is 4, okay, here's n, 4, n is even, multiplied by 2, 8. The length of the petal is 4 because you take the absolute value of this. Now, let's say that this was negative 4. The maximum this is still going to hit is 4, and the minimum is still going to be negative 4. So, it's still the same amount of work, okay? Don't be thrown off if this happens to be a negative number. It just means that the orientation might be changing, that's all. So, when we go through this, okay, you have to solve. That should be your work. And these should be the 8 responses that you get, okay? Now, if you know that there are 8 petals, then you know that these are all going to become values that are not coterminal. So we write them out, okay? There are the ones where r was just positive 4, so we don't have to do anything with those. But then I took the ones that were negative and I converted them because we have to graph them. So you need to write r equals negative 4, theta equals 67.5. You're going to need it with a positive r to graph it. R equals negative 4, theta is 157. You need it with a positive r. You need it with a positive r. You need it with a positive r. And if you look, there are no unique points here, so there are none to cross out. So all we have to do is graph these 8 points, and then we can make our rows. And that is what you should have graphed. So, well, I have this on Desmos. Desmos is actually going to be a great tool to use because Desmos allows you to graph polar, so you can always check your polar curve. So what you do is, in order to go into polars, you have to make sure you say r equals, and now to grab theta, okay, if you go to, in here, this is the normal screen it's going to show you. If you go to ABC, right there is theta. So when you want to graph in polar, you just need to make sure that you set it as r and theta, not y and x. Now, I specifically put the polar grid here. If you hit this tool right here, graph settings, okay, notice the grid, that's the rectangular grid. There's the polar grid. Okay, you can always check your work. If you notice, let's see if it'll let us, okay, see what that, no, it's not letting us. Usually we can see what the point is. It's not letting us do it here. Maybe if it's in this mode. No. Okay, so you can at least check your graph by using Desmos if you'd like. So that is how you graph roses. So what you're responsible for is being able to tell me the length of the petal, how many petals there are, and to be able to graph it.